Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary, and today I'm going to be going over the first 10 books that I read in 2024. It is January 15th as of me filming this, and I have finished 10 books and DNF'd one book. So I wanted to just do a quick mid-month wrap-up. It will help me a lot when I get to the end of the month and don't have to recap 20 books and only instead have to recap like 10 more. So that is the reason that I'm doing this. I don't know if I'm going to do mid-month wrap-ups all year, but it does make sense for me to do this right now. First, I want to talk about the book that I DNF'd. It's actually the first thing that I tried to read this year. It was an audiobook of Peculiar Ground by Lucy Hughes-Hallett. And this is a multi-generational family story, which is usually something that I love. And it spans centuries in this castle slash villa slash something or other in England. So it focuses primarily on this one family and different decades of their lives as different things are happening. And as you can tell, I don't really know what happened in this book. I got to about 40%, realized I had no clue what was going on, and decided that I didn't care, so I put it down. Again, this is something in theory that I should have really liked, but I don't know if it was the narration of the audiobook that made it hard for me to focus on, or if it was just the skipping around of different time periods that was just difficult to listen to, or if it was just something that I wasn't interested in. But regardless, I did decide to put it down and I do not plan on picking it back up. So that's a bummer, but I will live with it. Now I'm going to talk about the books in the order in which I enjoyed them, which means I'm starting with the lowest rated books that I've read so far and then ending up with the highest rated books. And I've already had 2 5-stars this year, which is pretty good. The worst book that I've read so far is actually the most recent book that I finished, which was Digital Minimalism by Newport. This is a nonfiction book. I gave it 2 stars. I have a lot of problems with this book. It's pitched as teaching you how to like take back control of your life from your devices and how to really like live meaningfully. If you've read any book or are familiar at all with the concept of minimalism, one of the main like facets or tenets of minimalism is that you can have a better, more fruitful experience with the world if you have fewer things. And this is something that I don't think is always necessarily true, but I do think in certain instances it is true. And I am curious in the like digital realm, like with apps on your phone, particularly in my apps that you mindlessly scroll through. So for me, that would be like Instagram and TikTok, just things that I'm like constantly looking at when I'm bored or have like 5 minutes of my time. That's what I will go do. And so I was curious on what his thoughts were on how to really live more mindfully in those aspects. And the first like chapter-ish, 2 chapters maybe, of this book talk about that. And then the rest of the book completely derails. And the derailment is what I had a problem with. So basically what he says in the first bit of the book is you should do like a digital cleanse where you delete everything from your phone that is not like absolutely necessary. So like I would have to keep my work email because I need that for my job, but I could delete like WhatsApp, YouTube, Instagram, etc. You get it. Facebook was one that he focused on a lot. I don't use Facebook, so for me that's like a non-issue. But I do kind of feel like I maybe already implement a lot of the tools that he was suggesting. So what he was saying is you delete all those things from your phone for 30 days. You don't use them at all. You do a complete cleanse of all of it. And then after the 30-day period, you think back to like what you use each thing for. And if an app serves a function in your life and it is the best way to serve that function, then you re-download the app and you can use it. And a lot of people will like set rules. So like if you had, I don't know, like a news, like CNN, the CNN app, you don't need to scroll through the news 24 hours a day, but on Saturday, you look back through the main news stories so that you're informed. That was an example that he gave. I get that, okay? But also I think like, I'm not a minimalist, first of all. I'm very much a like, things can serve you. And if you enjoy things, there's nothing really wrong with that. So like, I know that Instagram is not the best way for me to keep in contact with friends and family members, right? That's one of his things, is that it has to be the best way to do this thing. But also like, that's not gonna stop me from sending a silly little reel to my friend who lives in Kentucky, you know, who I don't get to talk to that often. Do we still text sometimes? Do we still FaceTime occasionally? Yes. But I don't feel the need to restrict my social network to only phone calls, which is something that he advocates for in this book. I just think that is a very boomer attitude to have about things. Also, he uses examples of people, specifically he goes into like leisure time and how if you delete apps off your phone, you will have more leisure time because you can do things besides just scroll on your phone. Great idea, right? But the things that he insists upon as leisure time, I don't find are universal. Like one of the things he uses an example, okay, of a couple who are in their 30s, they're independently wealthy, they make money from this blog that they have about homesteading, right? Like that's their thing. That's all they do. They don't work outside of this blog that they have. I'm not saying that's not real work, okay? If you make real money, it's a real job. That's my thought on it. But like that's such a like niche, unique thing to have. And him being like, they spend all of their time outside. And if we spent all of our time outside, we would have a more richer experience. And like, here's the thing. If I was independently wealthy and did not have to go to a 60-hour-a-week job and then come home and clean my house and cook my dinner and take my dogs on walks and like care for things, that would be great. But like me deleting Instagram from my phone is not going to allow me to have that much extra time. Do you know what I mean? So that is my thought on that. This has been kind of a rant, but the book just, the more I read, the more angry it made me on like, I don't know who is taking care of this man's kids and his house and feeding him, but I feel really bad for her. So I read that and did not like it. What I want to talk about is Lover Revealed by J.R. Ward. And this is the 4th book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. I've talked about this kind of a lot, but it's a paranormal romance series that follows, each book basically follows a different guy in this like brotherhood of vampires. This book follows Butch, who is a human cop actually, and it's like a romance story, but it also each book like furthers the plot and gives you more insight into the vampire world. I don't know if I'm gonna have another 5-star from this series. I'm reading book 5 now and I'm not like super loving it. This is book 4 like I mentioned, and I don't know, I was excited for it because there has been a lot of buildup between Butch and then the vampire he's in love with is Marissa. So I was hopeful for that, but I feel like it went on like a weird shift and I wasn't super into that. And then I got kind of hooked at the end of this because it started hinting at Vicious, whose book 5 is about Vicious, who's one of the brothers. And I was very interested in where his storyline was going, but I can tell you as a person who's like 70% of the way through it, it's fine. I'm curious to see how it wraps up, but I'm not like obsessed with it like I was with book 2 and 3. Okay, I was obsessed with books 2 and 3. So for me, this is like kind of meh, which is fine. I don't know how many more of these books I'm going to read because of how meh I feel about so many of them, but I do think it's an enjoyable series. Like it's a fun time, but there's nothing super special about the last couple of books that I read in it. The next book that I want to talk about is Lucky in Love by Kasie West. This is Kasie or Kasie. The audiobook narrator pronounced the name Kasie, but to me it looks like Kasie, so you can let me know what you think. This is a YA contemporary, and it's about this girl who on her 18th birthday decides to play the lottery and she wins. And then her life kind of derails because of this. It sort of has a little bit of a like romance subplot with this guy Seth who works with her at the zoo. This was cute. There's nothing really special about it, but I did enjoy my time reading it. Like it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It's like the perfect example of a 3-star book for me because there was nothing fantastic about it and there was nothing bad about it. It just was. The next book that I want to talk about is Recursion by Blake Crouch. I'm pretty disappointed in this book because of how much I love Dark Matter. It's right here because I'm going to reread it this year. I have heard people say that the first Blake Crouch book that you read is the one that you feel the biggest tie to, and then his other books never feel as good because they're all very similar. And I think that is kind of true, but this book should have, in theory, been something that I loved. So the concept is we're following these 2 perspectives. I don't even know how to explain it without spoiling it, is the problem that I'm running into. So we follow two perspectives. Barry is a cop. Again, I don't like reading about cops. I don't know why that's like suddenly something that I just cannot abide, but as soon as there's a cop perspective, I'm like very uninterested. But anyways, we're following Barry, who's a New York City cop. Several years before the start of the book, I think probably like 10 years before the start of the book, his teenage daughter was killed in a hit and run, and his marriage fell apart after that. And so that's like his biggest regret, is that he did not save his daughter's life, right? Classic. And then we also follow, in a past timeline, a woman whose name I'm not going to remember now, who is a scientist. and she is working on this machine that is supposed to help people who have Alzheimer's hold on to their memories and like retain memory. But obviously things go awry, and there's also this thing in the present day where Barry is called false memory syndrome, where people are waking up and having like a memory of an entire lifetime that they have not lived. And a lot of people are getting really depressed from this because that life is better than the life they have, or just various different things. And it's causing like a lot of problems. And also it's kind of like the Mandela effect, but on steroids. People don't remember things correctly. And the premise of the book is basically like, if you can't trust your own memories, like what happens to the human race. And then obviously Barry and this girl are trying to figure it out. I liked part of this book, and I feel like without spoiling it, I can't really explain what I didn't like about it. But at certain points, it ends up having a lot of like time jumps and a lot of telling and not showing. And that just did not really work for me personally. There were too many timelines and not enough time spent making you care about them, if that makes sense. So I loved the idea of this book, but the execution was lacking for me. The next book I want to talk about is Circe by Madeline Miller. This book, I gave 4 stars. It was a 3.5 star that I rounded up. I wish I liked this more than I did. So this, if you don't know what it is, it's a Greek mythology retelling about Circe, who is the daughter of Helios, who is like a witch, and it follows like 1,000 years of her life. I don't think I'm a Greek mythology girly. That's really all I'm going to say about this. I read Song of Achilles by the same author, was told that it would wreck me, was so ready for tears, and they just did not come. I like this book more than that book, but ultimately I just don't think it's really for me. I just think I need to give up on Greek mythology, to be honest. Maybe all mythology. I just don't know if I'm into it. That sounds so negative. I did not dislike this book, okay? Mostly it was fine, but I liked it more than I disliked it, which is why I got 3.5 stars instead of just a solid 3. But I don't know, man. It just really like, it just didn't hit the way that I wanted it to, so I might have to get rid of not get rid of Madeline Miller, that sounds terrible. So I might have to cut Madeline Miller's books off my TBR going forward. The next book that I want to talk about is Damnation Spring by Ash Davidson. This book I really enjoyed. I did think it was too slow for me. I had pacing issues with it, but it's set in the 70s and it follows this family. Basically, it's a man, a woman. I'm not going to remember the names. The woman's name is Colleen. I don't remember the guy's name. And they have a son named Chubb. And basically what's happening is the woman has had 8 or 10 miscarriages. And she wants to have another baby. That's what she wants. Chubb is 4 or 5. 5 or 6? 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And she really wants to have another baby. Rich, that's the husband's name. Rich is sick of seeing his wife go through miscarriages and does not want to have another baby. And they both are trying to basically like save their family. Not in like a real sense, but like she thinks having another baby will like save their marriage. And he decides to buy this tract of land because he thinks if he can buy this tract of land and like grow his own mill, he's a logger. It's somewhere in California. And he thinks that if he can do that, make the money, then he can keep his family happy and safe. Because right now they don't have very much money. And obviously his wife keeps having miscarriages. And then you find out as the book goes along that the chemicals that are being sprayed to help like the loggers and stuff is causing people to get really sick. The chemicals are causing people to get really sick, including his wife having all these miscarriages. And so it becomes this book about environmentalism, but also like not in the sense of like cutting trees down is bad, but in the sense of like, at what point do we value the economic situation of people over human health and over tradition and over cultures being wiped out? I thought this book had a lot of really interesting things to say, and I really liked the setting of it. I really enjoyed the perspectives that it gave. I did think it was a little slow to start and get into really what it's trying to say, but I think if you can handle a slower paced book, I think you would like it. The next book that I want to talk about is a 4-star that almost got 5 stars for me, but not quite. And that is They're Going to Love You by Meg Howrey, which I read for the Buzzwordathon prompt, which is there, and there. This book is about a girl who, it's told in different timelines, but essentially her dad and her mom got divorced when she was a very young child, and her dad had this husband. And at the start of the book, in present day, she has not spoken to her dad in nearly 20 years because they had a falling out nearly 20 years ago. And now her dad's husband has called her and said, hey, I know you and your dad haven't spoken in a long time, but he's dying. So if you could come see him, I think it would mean a lot to him, and we would really love to see you again. And so she's going to New York for the first time in almost 20 years to see her dad, who, again, she hasn't spoken to in almost 20 years. How many times can I say that? But we also get like the backstory of her relationship with her dad and her dad's husband when she was a kid. It also, the backstory part is set in the 80s in New York, so we get a little bit of like her childhood fear of HIV and AIDS without really knowing what it is, because she's afraid for her dad, because she can see that her dad and his husband are really like scared of this virus and like the loss that they experience, and her like being a witness to that but not really being involved in it, which I thought was really interesting. You also get the story of why she hasn't spoken to her dad in all these years. Frankly, this is one of those books where I just feel like, I'm not a parent, okay? But the amount of times that I see books where parents will like hold a grudge against their child for something, first of all, that's not even that bad, but it's like, it's so selfish for you to be the one to bring somebody into the world and then you be the one to like cut them off for like a mistake. Doesn't make any sense to me. And so I just like, as soon as that happened, there later was like a reconciliation scene or whatever. Like, I don't think that's a spoiler. That's what the book is leading to. But for me, I just like, as a child, if either of my parent reacted to me the way that this guy reacted to his daughter, I would not want any other contact. Like, my parents would have to do less for me to be like, I don't think we can really have a relationship anymore. So that's just how I felt about it. That's part of the reason this book didn't get 5 stars. Because it was like very emotional to read about how like, she has this whole thing about how she always wanted to be someone's number one. And her mom ends up remarrying and having a second child. And she felt like that child was her mom's like number one. Obviously her dad and his husband were each other's number one. But she felt like she never was somebody's number one, which is so sad. Or like favorite person. I don't know, which is like a very sad thing. And like, I really felt for her in that. But also, as it went on, it lost me a little bit. But I do think it's really worth the read if that sounds like something you would like. Next up, I do have 3 5-star reads that I want to talk about. One is a reread, so I'm not really going to go into it, but I reread Educated by Tara Westover. I gave it 5 stars again. I actually didn't reread it, but this is Tara Westover's memoir about growing up in, not a cult, but she grew up with a family that like were survivalists and didn't believe in public education or hospitals or whatever because they thought that the government was going to try to like take over their lives. Essentially, they're like conspiracy theorists, and it's just about her getting out of that and interacting with the real world for the first time as like a 16 or 17-year-old going to college, and what that was like. It's a really interesting book. It's a really sad book. A lot of it makes me really upset for her, but also, I don't know. I really like that book. That's why I've read it again this year. I'll probably reread it at some point in the future. I actually annotated it when I reread it this time, which was very fun. But yeah, I'm in my rereads era. So I reread that. Then I have Saving Ruby King by Catherine Adel West, which is like a contemporary mystery, sort of. And it's set in 3 timelines. It also follows the perspective of a church at one point, which I'm realizing is something that I like the book Form and Emptiness. And what is the Elif Shafak book where there's like a tree that's part of the Island of Missing Trees, I think. I love that when there's like an inanimate object that has a perspective. I just think that's fun, okay? I have a great time with it. This one is, again, like I said, a mystery, but we have in the present day timeline, there's a girl named Ruby King, whose father is really abusive. Her mother has been murdered, and the whole book is sort of trying to figure out who did it and how to help Ruby because now she's stuck with this abusive father. And you follow all these different perspectives, and I think I probably could have seen it coming, but I did not. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I also really liked the 3 generations of like story. So you follow the grandparents of Ruby and like their generation, and then her dad and his generation, and then her, obviously. And I thought that was such an interesting way to tell a story. I really love this book. I have not heard anyone talk about it really, but I think more people should read it because it was really, really good. And then the best book that I read so far in January is Kept Animals by Kate Miliken. And this book is another dual timeline book. And in the past timeline, we're following Rory Ramos, who is, it's the 80s, I think, and she lives on a ranch in California. And we're following her like sort of coming of age story. And in the present day timeline, we're following her daughter, who knows that she was conceived when her mom was a teenager on this ranch. She doesn't know who her dad is. She doesn't know how this came to be because her mother is a lesbian. And she knows that the ranch was burned down when her mom was pregnant with her. And so she's never been there. She was raised by her grandfather, who was actually her step-grandfather, and her mom. But her grandfather is who mostly raised her because her mom was a like war correspondent journalist, and she has actually died at the very beginning of the present day timeline. So you're basically getting the story of Rory Ramos as it's being told to her daughter, if that makes sense, by different people in her life. I absolutely love this book. I thought it was phenomenal. I am not a horse girl. There are a lot of horses in this book, but I truly think even if you're not a horse person, don't let the cover and the like horse ranch, horse breeders thing fool you. This was great. It's such a well done story. It's really like heartbreaking, and parts of it are like really hard to read. I will tell you that. So I don't know if there's trigger warnings listed anywhere for this book. They are kind of spoilery, but I think if you have significant triggers, I would look into that. But I thought it was really well done. I would read something else by this author. I don't know if she's written anything else, but this is one of the oldest books on my TBR on Goodreads, and I'm so glad I finally read it. I think this was like the second book on my Goodreads TBR. So I'm glad that I gave it a shot because I really, really loved it. Those are the 10 books that I've read so far in January and the one book that I DNF'd this month so far. Hopefully there's not too many more DNFs, but I am really trying to cull my TBR this year, so I'm trying to put things down that I'm not enjoying. I should have put down that Cal Newport book. By the time I got to the point where I was like really annoyed by it and it went from a 3 to a 2-star, I only had like an hour left of the audiobook that I was listening to on 3 times speed, so it wasn't worth it to me to DNF. I would rather just count that as a book read for my Goodreads goal. But yes, let me know what your first 5-star was of 2024 if you've had one so far. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!